Taylor Swift released a new album this week, sparking conversations on the role of tortured poets in society and also in the church. Also, gospel singer Mandisa sadly passed away, and an explosive new documentary exposes the dirt in Hollywood and children's entertainment. We talk about all that and more on this episode of Faith and Pop Culture. Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 7 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined, as I always am, by the ministry to my tortured poet, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Oh, not too much, Daniel. I'm just excited that the weather is such that I can wear a hoodie out of doors.
See, that hoodies are my go-to aesthetic in all seasons.
I never noticed that.
So it could be, 90 some degrees here in Georgia, and you just turn on the air conditioning and spend extra money for that and put on a hoodie.
There you go.
That's my life hack.
Well, you grew up in the Canadian Rockies, so like summer was hoodie weather.
Oh yeah.
It was like, and then winter was parka weather.
Yeah.
So
Winter is like hoodie weather plus a jacket, and then summer is
just the hoodie
without the jacket.
Yeah.
But there's something cozy about a hoodie, and there's also something cozy about doing this podcast because there's some interesting stuff going on this week. Obviously, the biggest news is that some upstart indie artist named Taylor Swift released a new album.
Double album?
A double album, which seems like several people have purchased. We'll get into it a little bit.
She has some fans.
This will be the Faith and Pop Culture Taylor's version of the episode, but also just some other stories and things that just sort of caught our attention for that's going on in culture. So, glad that you have tuned in once again, just to look at, hey, what's going on as Christians? How can we be mindful of what's happening in the culture, the conversations, and engage in it, and really contribute to it beyond just being mad about it when we're told to, criticizing it. And I think that is a segue into, it might not seem like it at first, into the Taylor Swift discussion and the role of sort of creators and, artists in society. But let's start off with the biggie with Taylor Swift. I think there's probably no one that would debate or question that she's the biggest entertainer in the world right now.
Yeah.
I think the more the discussion becomes more like, is she the biggest entertainer ever? She's in that, she's like in the GOAT conversation rather than just, like she's huge, like on a level that at least like in our lifetime, like maybe like the Beatles or something, but it's just a different time. Like I didn't live through Beatlemania, so maybe I'm naive in my youth. But like with social media and like the access to it and like the more global kind of reach and digital music and all that stuff, like there's a case to be made that like no one has reached the level of popularity and influence in the history of like music than Taylor Swift has.
Yeah, I would probably have to agree with that. I haven't delved into the numbers and all that, but just based on what I've seen, it seems like she's got to be like, if not at the top, like very near the top, like in top 5 of all time, I would think. Yeah,
which obviously makes anything she does, whether that's attend a football game or whatnot, kind of newsworthy for some people. But I think, again, like I don't care about the celebrity gossip side of stuff. Like, I'm not interested in like what she's wearing to watch a football game. But I think when she comes out with music, like this is even if you're not into like I'm not like a Taylor, I'm not a Swiftie. This isn't my, she doesn't play European speed metal, so like it's not always on my radar. But as a Christian, I feel like it is important to be like, it's a noteworthy thing when the most influential artist living releases new material. And I don't want this to be, because I think, again, like I said, I'm not like a huge Taylor Swift fan, so I don't want this to be like a deep dive on song by song of her album. Because I think maybe the more interesting conversation is sort of more thematically, which we can jump off of it. But I know I have listened to the album. Have you?
Yeah, I did. I did listen to it.
Initial thought: is this? Are you a Swiftie now, or are you?
I mean, I think there's some good songs on there. I don't know. again, it's not necessarily my cup of tea. But I don't. I mean, I think it's good. I guess. Um, I think the standouts for me was her song "Florida" with Florence and the Machine. I'm a big Florence and the Machine fan, so I thought that was cool that she collabed with her. Um, yeah, I think there's just a lot of maybe just at a cursory glance, a lot of maybe religious undertones or overtones. I don't know how you would put that, but there seems to be a lot of obviously, as the title would suggest, a lot of angst in this album, which I thought was interesting. Um,
Which is just kind of funny because if you knew nothing about pop culture and stuff, and you just like saw Taylor Swift, your like initial reactions probably wouldn't be like she writes angsty songs. Like she's always
Yeah.
wrote kind of angsty. Like,
yeah.
you know.
Well, and it's just funny because I mean, I don't know, she's early 30s, I guess, and it's just funny to come out with an album that's so angsty at this stage of your life. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is because it feels like so much of it was kind of a callback to maybe earlier years, and she's had time to process life more, and so she's maybe writing songs that she wished she had written earlier. I don't know, but it just had a lot of that teenage angst. I feel like throughout, and just sort of like sticking it to your parents, and just a lot of that stuff that just seems very teenage angsty, thematically at least.
Writing like in her journal in her room, like,
Yeah,
she's got her.
just mad at her parents, and just like there was one line where I don't even remember what song it was, but it was talking like telling her parents that she's gonna have her boyfriend's baby, but not really. I just wanted to see the look on your face when I told you, like that kind of stuff. It's like I don't know, like that. You're in your mid-30s, like.
Which I feel like, again, yeah, like some of that doesn't necessarily excite me or interest me, but I feel like the lyrics are, because like, again, she's a talented songwriter. Like,
Yeah.
she cranks out hits like crazy, and we can probably all of us, even if we're not a fan, can like sing the melodies and stuff. But like, especially for this album, like to me, it sounded all the same. Like the musically, it's just the songs kind of bleed into each other. It's all the same style, all the same kind of tempo. Like, but I feel like all the discussion you see like online about it is like it's the lyrics. Like I feel like
Yeah.
what makes her interesting, whether you like the lyrics or not, is that like in a way she almost is a modern day poet. Like I know some of the lyrics can be sort of poppy and like,
Yeah.
but like she writes things that I feel like you have to sort of get invested in and like immerse yourself and kind of think. Like it's not, at least for some of her songs.
Yeah.
I feel like she does almost like speak on behalf of segments of culture, or like she
Yeah.
on behalf of listeners. Like
I think that's what maybe has made her such a powerful, just I guess, voice of our generation, and just a powerful and popular artist, is because you can sort of inhabit her songs, and because they're always done typically in a real narrative style that you can just sort of you can see yourself in these situations, and I think it's less to do with like her brilliant musicianship or clever things that she's doing musically, whereas like somebody like Jacob Collier, who is doing just ridiculous things musically. Taylor's not like she's pretty down the pipe. I feel like when it comes to like musically driven, and it's pretty like this is sort of mainstream pop music. But what makes it interesting is the way that she communicates stories through her music.
because even like the way that they were like previewing and promoting this album before it came out, like they didn't release I don't think any songs until the full thing was
Yeah.
out. But they were like releasing snippets of lyrics online, like, or she was like she'd post like here's this line, and like there is something about that. And I was thinking interesting too. There's a thought I had just about like why that like the power of lyrics. Like I think like, as the church, there's a lot disproportionate like emphasis on movies, and like we like this one movie, and like the Christian community is very focused on
Yeah.
the influence of this, and we need to dissect it and get into it, and like which is a movie that like a certain amount of people are going to see maybe once. It's 2 hours, as opposed to like the lyrics of these songs,
Yeah.
which are going to be listened to like by a much larger audience and like repeatedly for months, if not years. Like
Yeah.
there's a case to be made that like song lyrics are much more influential just by their repetition and like
Yeah.
than a movie. Which even if you love a movie, like I love Lord of the Rings, like I've maybe seen those movies like 15 times, which is a lot, but like I've listened to albums and stuff I don't even like as much probably 100 times. Like
Right.
there is the difference, which is why I think it does matter like what she is talking about. And I did want to get into that a little bit. Again, we don't want to spend the whole time on an old T Swift, but I do think.
But you do.
Well, this is my chance to
Finally
to come out and
You're
confess.
a deeply closeted Swiftie.
Yeah, I just haven't had the courage yet to step out in that way. But there is so she's been sort of talking again because there's so much emphasis on the lyrics, the storytelling, the meaning, rather than just sort of the stylistic stuff. There's been a bunch of interviews and stuff in the last couple of days since this album dropped, just kind of her explaining sort of what the inspiration for this, like what she's talking about. And there's one that caught my eye because I think it's, at least as I could tell through my listen through, like a central one to the album. So this is a Variety is quoting her where she's talking about the song Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, where she says she wrote it alone at the piano. And then her quote was, when I felt bitter about just all the things we do to our artists as a society and as a culture. She says there's a lot about this particular concept on the Tortured Poets Department. What do we do to our writers, to our artists, and our creatives? We put them through hell. We watch them create, then we judge it. We love to watch artists in pain, often to the point where I think sometimes as a society we provoke that pain and we just watch what happens. And again, the name of the album, it captures sort of this theme of like, the tortured artists and sort of what we do, which I thought is an interesting discussion. Like what is sort of the role of sort of these creatives? I think, and there's levels to that as a society, as a people, but I think also just like as the church, like, you know, anything to this quote that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do feel like maybe in many ways this could be like her magnum opus as far as an album goes, because I feel like it is exactly like down the middle of like maybe representation of who she is as an artist, that I think she's at her best when she's a tortured poet, perhaps. And so I feel like in many ways this is some of her best like maybe lyrical work or style of making music. But I think there is some truth to what she's saying. Like I think, you know, you could say it's the media or just the public at large. They just get obsessed with celebrity, and you know whether that's like I think that's just like human nature that the people love to just follow some charismatic person, and they connect with the music that they write. And so there's a unhealthy level of obsession with people. And I think like, you know, somebody like Taylor Swift has that in spades because of who she is and how popular she is and just how like, I feel like crazy perhaps some of her fans are. And she just has it at a scale that like, I don't know that anybody else has. And so I think she probably feels that like tortured artist, maybe more so than other people, but that has been a trope that's been around since artists.
Yeah, I feel
guess,
like there's a grain of truth to it, more than a grain. There's a nugget of truth, but it is sort of there is also a nugget of sort of cliche to like the sort of the stereotype of you know, to be an artist is to be this angsty, sort of broken, depressed. Like it's sort of the idea that like, you know, only good art comes out of like
pain and suffering.
Suffering. And even like if you listen to our episode last week where I shared my things that I like that you should like do, like Anthony Trollope, this like prolific author, like was super popular at his time, and then he wrote like an autobiography where he like revealed sort of his process of like very regimented of like I wrote this many words at this time, and like not at all the romanticized, and like his popularity just like tanked for like decades after, because it's like, oh, like are you even an author if you're not like, you know, just sort of bleeding onto the typewriter? Like,
yeah,
I mean, it's just like you treat it like a job and you sit down and you write. Like, I think there is there is sort of this like self like fulfilling prophecy of like, we got to have this image to be a real artist. We got to be tortured, as opposed to like, hey, can art also come out of like joy and like,
Yeah.
excitement and wonder and awe and these other emotions beyond just angst? But I mean, like, even if you look at scripture, like, a lot of the banger songs from David come out of like
Oh yeah.
angst. Like
He had some angst.
like it is, there is something about like those emotions and like reaching that point that I do think kind of produces.
Well, sorry.
no,
Finish.
you.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I think there's that like deep human emotion of just pain and suffering that does like draw us in. So I think there is something also just very appealing about art that evokes those emotions. Like if you think just about like super sad songs or like very sad movies, there is some, I don't know, maybe it's maybe it's just me, but like there is something that can kind of draw you into that. I feel like in some ways much faster than a more uplifting type of song. And I don't know, maybe that's just a negativity bias that I have, but I feel like there is something you can almost get into that headspace a lot faster, the sort of the negative side of it or the sad side of it, than you could, the happy side.
And I mean, there's a case to be made that part of why a lot of Christian music today isn't as like captivating or doesn't like resonate wider is because we almost are the opposite of that. Like it's,
Yeah.
it is very uplifting and like we're not as comfortable with that to like dwell on angst and like difficult and doubt. We sort of want the like more therapeutic, like,
Yeah.
it's gonna be all right. God is still good, like rather than just like the hopelessness of the situation.
Yeah, I would imagine the church doesn't want to really wallow in the misery and the suffering that the human condition sometimes has to go through. So yeah, and maybe too, I guess CCM in general tends to want to maybe try and be like the antidote to all the pain and sadness and anguish. But I think in doing so, you sort of also you skip over that, and I think sometimes you can be left feeling like, well, this is sort of a fake kind of expression.
It's like a forced smile. Almost,
Yeah, it's like, oh, things are great.
God's good all the time. All the time, God's good. It's like,
Right,
well,
right,
yeah, but,
right.
like, how are you doing? Like, things seem like they're rough for you. Like, it's
Right.
sort of that jumping over. Like, not that God isn't good all the time, and all the time God is good.
Yeah.
But like, you want to skip over, just dealing with some of those emotions. Which again, I think Taylor Swift, you could argue she dwells on them too much, but like, she deals with stuff that I think people can resonate with because there are. But I do think kind of the one other, and then we can move on, kind of component to the discussion is just, I do think sort of the tortured poet thing also comes from just, there's always been, whether it's just society or like with the church, like it's a messy, sort of confusing, uneven relationship between like creatives and then like everyone else. Like particularly again, this faith and pop culture podcast, like with like the church, there is sort of this sense of like, what do we do with these creatives? Like, do we, how do we treat them? Like, do we, and I think that you could say that like, sort of like Taylor Swift is in that quote with Variety about the way we kind of use them. And like, I think as the church, we can be guilty of treating sort of them as almost as like a commodity. Like they're these sort of, they're like a tool we have in our toolkit to like, we can kind of pull them out and use them and like, but we don't necessarily always trust them to like, get out of their lane a little bit, or like we don't.
Yeah.
Want, like,
well, and I would think maybe just thinking about like more physical art, like say painting or that kind of stuff. It's like, I think we talk about this all the time, but like bring the painter out to like paint the children's building, but it's like it's not like do something in here for kids. It's like, please do this. Like here's what we want you to do, and like stay pretty close to that. And there's not a whole lot of room for like the artistic expression within that, which I get. I mean, there's a lot at play there, but yeah, like you said, I think it's a lack of trust in the artist, and I think it's just sort of a delicate dance. I think that the church is not always great at performing.
and to be fair too, like as someone that I've dealt with a lot of artists, and I just thought about some of these things a lot. Like, it's a two-way. Like the relation. It's not just that the church doesn't know what to do with artists. Like, I feel like artists a lot of times also don't really know what to do with the church. Like,
Yeah.
both sides sort of need to like not move to the middle, but like make sacrifices and like be understanding to each other to make that work. It's not just about the
Yeah.
church. Like, hey, artists, like go crazy. Like we're gonna back off, and like it is sort of this two-way thing. But like it's very like if you read through scripture, like the arts are given. I think more than even people that haven't like looked intentionally at this topic would realize, like are given a very high place of honor. Like
Yeah.
the arts are like artists are given very important roles and like in communicating God and like representing God, and even just the idea that like like if you think of like music, like there's music in heaven. Like,
Yeah.
was were the angels singing like before Adam and Eve were created? Like you would assume that there's always been sort of the idea like art isn't a human invention. Like we sort of think of it as that, but like the arts have always been a part of sort of God's like like that's like a heavenly thing, and we sort of echo some of that. Like
Yeah.
there is a very important role for creatives and the arts, and I think as Christians we just need to make sure that are we treating it with enough seriousness, and like are we treating those creatives right, or are we sort of reflecting some of what Taylor Swift is saying about sort of
Yeah.
these tortured artists that just sort of get used, but then, kind of left out to dry or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say too, like there's also just there is some aspect of the tortured artist that is perhaps self-inflicted as well. Like I read Van Gogh, a biography on Van Gogh, and like I feel like he's a quintessentially tortured artist. And boy, like did he have a rough life, but like a lot of that was self-inflicted, and like like he had some. I think it's pretty clear that he had some mental struggles and emotional issues that was maybe undiagnosed or whatever, but so much of that too was just sort of like he just couldn't let go of that. I'm a tortured artist and I have to be tortured in order to create my art, and maybe that's true for some people, but I also think there is that element, I think, of like, all right, like maybe just like put on your your big boy pants and like just deal with some of this stuff and then go back to making your art. And so I don't know, like I think there's some give and take there as far as the tortured artist motif goes.
Yeah, and I think sort of like what is the way forward? I think it's complicated, but I think at like a broad level, I think Taylor Swift is hitting on some, on at least some interesting themes that are applicable to sort of how we just see creatives in our culture and in our church, which is definitely worth thinking of. Kind of another story. Again, this isn't one that we necessarily are gonna like do a deep dive into, but just thought we would note. Speaking of kind of artists and creatives, sort of sad news this last week. Mandisa, who is like a Grammy-winning kind of gospel singer, kind of came to fame in 2006 when she was on American Idol. I think she finished in ninth place, but she was one of those stories of like the person that didn't win but captured the hearts of America enough that actually had like probably more of like a successful career than the people that finished ahead of her, and again like won a Grammy, had success, but she passed away this week at age 47, and don't necessarily want to like the details remain unclear, and there's an investigation, so don't necessarily want to just like speculate on things that may or may not be true. It just sort of a lot of the conversation around her passing, beyond just like lament and sorrow, is this that like she did struggle with depression and some of these things, and I think some of those conversations and stuff, you just sort of you pray that good comes of those conversations being out and like people talking about that and sort of celebrating what she did. But I don't know if you were familiar.
Yeah, I wasn't too familiar with her music. I mean, I probably would recognize a song if I heard it, but no, she wasn't someone that I followed too closely. But yeah, it's always sad to hear passing so I mean, young. I think when I was young, I would consider that old, but now it's like, oh boy, yeah, like
That's not too far on the horizon.
yeah, I know, like that isn't, and so yeah, so we'll keep her family in your prayers and in our prayers.
Yeah, and obviously, more will come from that story as more is known. But a different story that is less ambiguous is that there are the odd like pervert and creep in Hollywood, working particularly with when it comes to children's entertainment. So this is actually a story that's been on our, it's been in our show notes for several weeks, and we just haven't got to it yet. But I did want us to at least mention the kind of the explosive, kind of really trending documentary Quiet on Set, which has finished its run of episodes. So it's been going for, the last month, but continues to be very much a prominent thing. Like people are still talking, it's very relevant, and hopefully will continue to be relevant. And kind of for those that aren't familiar or haven't seen some of the headlines, essentially this documentary sort of explored like Nickelodeon, like sort of I don't know if you call it like children's like it's more like tween. Like, it's not like Bluey or like like a cartoon. Like but it's like like people like Amanda Bynes, and like a lot of those people came from.
Yeah, tween and like teen
young viewers. Sort of. And it's kind of exploring like the culture behind the scenes of these shows, and just exposing just a bunch of garbage. Just a bunch of just sick men that are like kind of preying upon these like teenage or younger girls and like
kids,
and even just some of the things that they would have them do. Like we see like some of the clips for these, like which like maybe people were mad at the time. Like maybe I wasn't plugged in, but like clearly sexualized images and like activities or like things that they would have them do, which just sort of like all throughout all these shows, like, and it's just sparked a conversation. And lots of other like artists or like entertainers and stuff from that era have like come out and spoken about just their experiences and like the things that happened to them, and it's sparked a lot of, I think, important conversations, but also just it's kind of changed the narrative a little bit about sort of that era. But kind of any thoughts that you have on?
Yeah, I mean, besides the fact that it's just some really like sick and twisted people involved, and you wonder how something like that, because it didn't sound like it was a like a one-off thing. Like it was like this was like part and parcel of the culture of a lot of these Nickelodeon films, and you would have to believe probably extends beyond Nickelodeon. Like I think Disney ended up hiring one of the producers that was, I think, actually had spent some time in prison because of his activity on set. And so like you have to believe that this is more, I think, more widespread than Nickelodeon. But I think it just speaks to the just the uncomfortable nature of like child entertainers, and how like, I mean, I don't want to say we don't need any, or there's obviously a right way to do it and a wrong way, but it's like, this is like just very, very uncomfortable, that something like this would be allowed to happen for such an extended period of time. And also like, we've talked about it before, where I think people can really like look down on some of these child actors who just go off the rails later. Like very few people, it is the exception, I would say, for child actors to end up well-adjusted adults. And so I think this perhaps sheds some light on why that is the case.
Yeah, because like I remember like multiple times of like sort of these children actors that grew up like in youth group, like they were the case study, the bad example of like, they were young, they had everything, and then like they just got seduced by the fame and the money, and the like, they got corrupted like by their own, like very much.
So it's like, see it, like being rich and famous doesn't buy you happiness.
See, you can't be happy. And again, I think that is true. Like the points aren't necessarily wrong, but the emphasis was very much like they, their own selfish greed, like they couldn't resist the sin, and like, and again, maybe that's true as well, but
But
I think
also, like, they endured
yeah,
things that most normal kids.
but I feel like what this documentary has been doing is just like shift the perspective a little bit to like maybe some of that's true, but like these like many of these young kids are like victims. Like
Yeah.
like we can point a finger at some of these ones that just like went off the rails, and like not just blame them for, well, if you were just sort of being more grounded. Like, well, it's hard to be grounded when like your
Yeah.
boss is putting you in an environment where he's like sexually abusing you or putting you in compromising situations, or like feeding some of these like these conflicts between co-stars and things,
Yeah.
and like just toying around with these
Just
people.
playing with your life too. And I think that environment mixed with like everyone you meet on the street wants to like get a picture with you or like get your autograph or wants to be you and like thinks you're such a lucky person. It's like that. Like it's no wonder that anyone made it through that sort of environment. I think just on the human psyche, like that would just be so much to try and just wade through as an adolescent. Like that just seems
Well, like
almost impossible.
because like if you like sort of like to go back to Taylor Swift, like you see like adults that like sort of it's hard to be a tortured poet, like to be
Yeah.
in that industry and in the public eye, and like many adults struggle and go off the rails,
Yeah.
and become alcoholics and have to like like Johnny Depp types or like whoever, all these types are like Iron Man, like went through his rough patch, and
Yeah.
a lot of them like maybe come out of that, but like a similar situation, but when you're like 11,
Right.
is like I don't know if anyone, and so to me, like obviously the big story, the big thing is like that needs to be addressed. Like that's the main
Yeah.
takeaway is like there needs to be changes so that we don't allow that to happen. But I feel like the more I guess like close to home for us takeaway is just the way we, I think, as Christians or just as people, like sort of that judgment of like just assuming, like,
Yeah.
like we don't know what other people, like their circumstances that led them to be that way, or like to, like it's easy to sort of blame them for, I feel like our society is very much like in America at least is like it's your own choices. Like we're a land of your
Right.
choice. Like make good choices. Like and your life will turn out well. Make bad choices, which is true. But there's a lot of choices that we can't make, and like we are the product of other people's choices. And I feel like there is a need for more grace to like, not that we let people like that we just overlook bad choice. Like people, there's still consequences for all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like like people that come into our churches or whatever, like there's a lot of things that happen that were out of their control too, that led them to be the way they are, have the fears or tendencies that they do. And like as Christians, we need to be maybe a little bit more patient about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I would 100% agree.
So hey, let us know your thoughts too. Again, like, I haven't watched through like this whole documentary. I've seen a lot of the clips and like portions of episodes and a lot of the interviews and just that alone. There's just so much stuff in there. But if you have been someone that has watched through all these episodes, again, if you're watching our video, jump in the comment section, share your thoughts, or send us a message if you're listening to us and just sort of join the conversation. But another conversation that we are going to have, that we have every week, is about just the entertainment that we are immersed in this culture. So our next segment we have out now and coming soon.
So one of the latest movies to hit theaters near you is The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Daniel, you've seen this. We've got a review up on our channel. What's maybe a quick takeaway for the people?
Yeah, well, it seemed like this movie didn't get a lot of traction, but I don't know, it's interesting. Like I feel like I actually kind of liked this movie. I didn't think it was great. I didn't like love this movie, but it wasn't one that I like left the theater and I'm like, I just wasted 2 hours of my life. Like it was entertaining.
Wasn't a total bomb.
And at least to me, it's just a reminder that like, like, not all movies and stuff need to be this profound, life changing. Like,
Yeah.
like it's okay to have, it's like a musical album. Like you got your radio hits and those are good, but like sometimes you just put a song of a neat idea and like it's
Yeah.
a filler song. It's fine. That's sort of what this movie was. And I do think that, again, I encourage you to check out my review. It does also raise some questions about just sort of like violence in cinema and like the role of that and sort of this like cathartic violence of, like you just sort of like there's just tons and tons of death, but it's against Nazis, so it's sort of like it's intentionally trying to sort of be this like therapeutic, like watch bad guys get bad things done to them,
Yeah.
which I think again that's a big debate, but
Yeah.
I could check out my full review for that.
Yeah. Well, and coming up this weekend, we also have Unsung Heroes coming out. Are you gonna
I'm seeing this one.
see this?
Like, by the time this episode drops, my review might actually already be out because I'm seeing it tomorrow. Kind of another faith-based film. We've mentioned this last week. I think not necessarily a movie that like I'm had like a paper chain like looking forward to, but I usually am like again faith-based films. There's some really good ones. There's some that don't interest me as much because I feel like there's not always like I usually agree with the what they're selling. I'm already like I've already bought like
Yeah.
so it's hard to where I get more interested in ones that I feel like there's more to wrestle with than like other ideologies. But I do think just as like a creative person and like I'm interested in how faith-based films make faith-based films. Like I feel like
Yeah.
sort of how are we telling these stories like for good, for maybe not good. So from that angle, I'm excited just to see like and I think it's good to have it seems like every month we've got a new faith-based film lately.
Yeah, well, I feel again, I think faith-based film has sort of graduated into a new tier of movie making. Still a few tiers I think to go in general, but I think it has risen.
Yeah, I think quality-wise, maybe
Yeah.
you can argue there's some tiers, but like quantity-wise, it's essentially just another genre now. Like you get tons of these movies now. Like almost every
Yeah.
month we have a new faith-based film. So again, I encourage you guys if you're interested in that movie, check out my review. But something that we don't have to wait even a month for. We only have to wait every second week is what you will share and enlighten us with. With our last segment of this episode, we have things we like that you should like too.
Well, Daniel, I was reminded this week of something that I do like quite a lot, and as a father of two young children, and that is the fantastic and brilliantly done show Bluey. It released its like this big episode called The Sign this past week, and boy, let me tell you, like, have a Kleenex box ready at your side. That episode in particular, and we can, I'm campaigning to have a deeper dive on Bluey maybe in a future episode, but that episode of Bluey the Sign just reminded me of how good somehow Bluey has the magic sauce of being able to relate story and emotion, and they just capture it perfectly. And it's just funny to think that a cartoon about a family of dogs, I think, has maybe the best television of like the decade, maybe the generation. So I don't know. I know you've watched some Bluey.
I'm a Blueyite or whatever we might call ourselves, and it is. It's like it's not just one of the best like kids shows. Like it's legitimately one of the best shows that we've had in a long time. Like it's so good. And I feel like again, I think we maybe need to have like an all Bluey episode or
I think
at least do a deep dive into
Let us know in the comments if we need to do a full hour of Bluey.
But I feel like it's a rare show that seems to like it respects all audiences. Like it treats kids like they're smart and they can handle mature things, but like it also knows that they're young and like it's not like trying to like push all these things on them or like.
And it's not annoying. It's you
not
know,
like, like I'm usually the one in our family that's like, you guys want to watch Bluey? Like,
I know. Well, anytime that the kids want to watch a show, it's like, okay, like let's watch Bluey, and sometimes it's put aside for other less interesting shows. But it's like this is a show that like we can legitimately all watch, and it's entertaining, and like I don't think as a parent there has been a show that has made me feel so seen, because like all of the things that like the parents are dealing with on the show, you're just like, man, like they just nailed that part about like just trying to like have 2 seconds for yourself, and like you're constantly bombarded by your children. So anyways, if you haven't watched it, it is worth worth your time.
Yeah, you need to do a Bluey binge.
Yeah, and they're only like 9-minute episodes, so it's like you can just sort of
You can binge.
you can binge exactly.
And it is in the last comment on Bluey, but I feel like it's a show that you never feel like it's pushing ideas on you. Like it's always sort of reflecting the experiences we have. Like,
yeah.
it's like you don't feel like there's some big agenda to like they're trying to push, like it's like they've sort of observed sort of human nature, and especially like in the dynamic of like a family.
Yeah.
And like they reflect some of those things, which is why you can relate and like have that emotional stuff without feeling like you're just being tricked by like, you know, some kind of hidden messages.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So,
but hey, we might not be as enjoyable as Bully, but we hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode of the podcast. And again, appreciate you guys that have been sort of following us now. 7 episodes in, we're racing towards double digits.
Oh yeah,
it's been
just around the corner.
It's been fun. Always a lot to talk about. And again, to encourage you guys too, if you guys see anything going on in culture, just questions like general or else like topical, like, hey, what do you think about this thing that happened, or have you seen this? Please send us a message about that, or comment in one of our videos. Not only are we only always looking for easy, ready-made content to talk about, but we do want to have you guys join the conversation and for us just to dive into things that you guys are thinking about. So encourage you guys to do that. But thanks for joining us. Hope you will join us next week, every week, Thursday, for new episodes. So we'll see you then for more conversations on faith and pop culture.